Hey, Rusty. People. It's a church. So I see. This kind of one. I know, it doesn't go on. No, I did see it, but I was gone a couple days off. I think that's the thing. Yeah, I already crossed that. I'll do a support meeting on the next step. Yeah. And then it's my car. Yes. All right, evening, I'm call to order this session of the Pleasant Hill School Board of Directors, Monday, June 2nd, 2025. We will start with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One reading of our mission statement.
All right. I'll make a vision. Never mind. Scott Harvish, congratulate all students with high levels of academic and personal achievement, ready for post-secondary excellence, prepared for productive international citizenship, basic instruction, and make a lively decision support.
Thank you. So there are no other changes or additions. Everybody else have any additions? Go ahead and have an introduction of our audience tonight. Please state your name and your relationship with the district.
Lilia Andrew, Equity Board or Committee.
My name is Rainey Plummer. I also am here for the District Equity Committee. And I have had 6 children come through Pleasant Hill from kindergarten all the way up, and I have one finally graduating again on Friday. I actually populated Pleasant.
I'm Madeline Carlton. I'm a former alumni, parent, budget committee member. Jessica Flood, math department chair and math teacher, and I'm here for the other.
I'm Keelan Thomas, Title I teacher, parents. Molly Powell, 4th grade teacher and parent. Jessica Wolpe, teacher and community member. Jolene Hill, community member, alumni, counselor, and equity committee. Selena Zlakowski, and parent, community member, and graduated last in for 4 years.
Welcome, thank you for coming. So we'll have a public forum opportunity for individuals who are here during this portion of the board meeting. Members of the public are specifically invited to present items for commendation and or concerns. At the discretion of the board chair, further public participation may be allowed at the time specific agenda items are under consideration by the board. See district policy BDDH. For those viewing online, the school district posted the upcoming agenda on our website, pleasanthhill.k12.or.us, the Friday before regularly scheduled Monday school board meetings. This will allow for public comment prior to the board meeting. Please click on the tab provided to share your comments for the school board to consider at the upcoming meeting. Personnel matters may not be discussed in public setting at the school board meeting. Members of the public who have personnel concerns or commendations should share them directly with the district superintendent, Mr. Chris. And just made me think while I was reading it, we have asked the district to explore ways for these meetings that are, for those viewing online, to be able to hear what we're saying better in the future. That's something that we can address as soon as possible. With that, we'll go ahead and have any public comment. Moving on to 5.0 action items. 5.1 approved May 19, 2025 board meeting minutes. Unless anybody had concerns with those on your motions. Board minutes. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye.
I would say.
Myself as well. 3 votes for aye, 2 abstaining. Passes. 5.2 approved May 19, 2025 budget committee meeting minutes. For the 3 of us that were there, there's no concerns with your motions.
I move to approve the May 19, 2025 budget committee meeting minutes of 2425.247.
Second, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstain. 3 ayes and 2 abstaining. Passes. 5.3, approved personnel action.
So tonight we do a personal action report, and it is for a license resignation.
Motions.
Move to approve the personal action resolution 2425.240.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Passes unanimously. 5.4, approved DEC appointments.
So this has been a couple of years in the making, and under the administrative role, in the state of Oregon, the school district is responsible for appointing members from those proposed by the superintendent and ensuring that membership is primarily representative of underserved student groups. So after conducting a thorough process involving broad community outreach to invite applications for membership on the district equity committee, applications were screened by our leadership team to ensure broad representation, and the below list of names are now being submitted to the board for appointment to district equity committee. It's recommended the board of directors appoint the following individuals to the Pleasant Hill School District Educational Equity Advisory Committee. You'll see that there's in the parentheses, there's the years next to that. So prior to this, we developed the guidelines as well. So those years represent the guidelines that we previously adopted. And so the members that we're recommending for you to approve tonight is Kayla Gottfried for 2 years, Brandy Plummer, who's here today, for 2 years, Aaron Jean Wolf for 2 years, Bailey Wolf for 2 years, Jolene Hill, who's here tonight for 2 years, Daphne Metcalf, Larkin for 2 years, Selena Zelikowski for 2 years, who's here as well, Lily Andrew is here as well for 2 years, Morgan Thomas for 2 years, Jessica Flood, who's in the audience for 2 years, and Kayla Hollinger. Who's our student representative, which will be there for 1 year next year as well. I just want to thank those of you that can make it tonight for coming in, and please put in a face to the name, and letting the board get a chance to meet you.
I second that. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service for the school district. Questions or concerns?
This must be all of the official criteria recommendations for the distribution of the members.
It did, we had a nice little cross representation of membership, yeah, and including having our students represented. Yes. And in fact, we had a total of, when we set the guidelines, as many as 12 members, and so we came close to that.
I'll solve your motions. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously.
You're all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're all welcome to stay. I just wanted to make sure we had a name to face and protect the person.
Thank you.
Final board communication, 6.1 board self-evaluation process.
So we get a little bit of feedback as far as similar process, certainly we want to change in the process, and even help you develop a timeline as far as, like last year, we went ahead and had this at the end of the June, and then finalized it at our August retreat. But I mean, we're right. If you're looking to do something similar, if you're doing that, then I can be with that, I get information out for you.
We did the eval and brought it back with all the information, and we voted, right, on the priorities. And then it took us,
If I remember correctly, the when we voted was the one in August, with the retreat, right?
When we finally put together the
There was
goals.
like the six
Yeah.
priorities in the year. I'd like to have them narrowed down before the school year starts, so we can hit the ground running, so. Is that a 5:30 start time?
The work session in August, I believe, is at 5:30, and I'll go into 7 o'clock meeting.
7 o'clock regular meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. So we start. I remember that, but I don't remember the end of last school year. What work we did on it.
I don't think there was much that we did at the end. I believe it went out, but I almost think that we got it out really early. And so getting stuff back and kind of remembering when that timeline was as far as returning stuff. And so the meeting in which we were, I think, going to meet to discuss the summary of it, I don't think that we had everything quite back yet. And so then we extended it and eventually pushed it to August as far as the formal sit down and redevelopment of goals. The timeline, we still have a June 16th meeting, and so we could have this out probably tomorrow as far as getting to the paperwork, and so we could bring it back to the June 16th meeting as well. As a discussion item, see if there was any questions or if there's anything, I guess, that you seem to be analyzed or an opportunity to formally provide feedback of the questions, if there was any individual thoughts. Otherwise, we bring it back in August for the work session, develop the goals, and then do the regular session. If we're ready for the goals.
Questions are, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm starting, that's what I was thinking, I was making sure everybody else had a chance to weigh in, to Jen's point. I think it would be good to have that out tomorrow so that we can do the evaluation leading up to the June 16th meeting. So we can have the self-evaluation for the school year. And then leading up to the August meeting, and we can do a reminder to come prepared to that meeting with potential priorities and potential goals, so that we're voting on prioritizing those goals at that meeting. Instead of we're still working on the self-evaluation from a previous school year.
So if we got those out on Thursday, or I'm sorry, on Tuesday the 3rd. What would be the date you want them back?
By the 13th. Lucky Friday the 13th.
So we'll get those back, sent out to each of you tomorrow, and then each director will send it to Stephen by the virtue.
I can work on it over college stage. Perfect. To July special meeting date for swearing in and selecting chair, vice chair.
So the meeting that is on the approved calendar for next year is July 1st. For swearing in members that were elected. And then that would be the date that we've also selected a chair and vice chair as well. So I want to confirm that that works for everybody. I know that Stephen has got, that date doesn't work for Stephen. We can still continue that and then catch Stephen at the August meeting. We do it during that time. We would probably need to go into the regular session first at 5:30, and then do a recess into the work session and pick the regular session back up at 7. That would work.
So we can make him the jail while he's not here.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of different date in July as well.
Are you at that one?
I'm back on the 5th. But leading up to that, yes. Oh, no, it's out of the country. So if there was anything else, I'd volunteer to just be present online, but it's a swearing in thing. And we'd rather be here in person for that.
One of the available dates would be Monday the 7th.
Maybe
Until the 1st and the 2nd.
that's a 7 o'clock meeting, correct?
We could make it earlier,
5:30.
we just need the, yeah, the 2 items.
I'm open to either 5. I expect 5:30 is the earlier is better.
Okay, so cancel the 1st. And 7th as a special meeting at 5:30.
What's the regular deadline?
It's 18th.
Point 3, 2025-26 budget committee motion. So this is in the packet. Referring back to the motion that was made at the end of the budget committee of the last meeting. Just make it clear, this is a discussion item. This is not for voting on tonight. And I think it's also clear before I go over the options that are in the packet, just for sake of transparency in the record, that so that the motion was to allow the board to vote for the budget as is, or to vote to add a full-time license funding for full-time license positions to the budget as is. And that's all the board can do is vote, and that's not what we're doing tonight again. But for June 16th, when we do vote on the budget after allowing for public comment, that we would be voting to add basically a full-time position to that budget. After that, it's up to the district on what is done with that position. So in terms of the financials for the options available to the board, option 1, appropriate additional funds, allocate an additional $1,043 $143,000 for salary benefits of a full-time FTE licensed instructional position designated to serve as reading specialist. This would represent an increase in the overall staffing budget when needs be reflected through the resolution adopting the budget for 25-26. Roles, reserves all currently budgeted positions, adds a dedicated literacy support role without reductions elsewhere. Column requires additional general fund or other discretionary revenue may affect ending fund balance or other contingencies depending on current projections. Uncertainty remains regarding federal Title II and Title IV, approximately $30,000. Funding currently supporting key initiatives. These funds are not received. The district may need to consider utilizing general fund dollars to maintain these programs. Option 2, reallocate existing appropriations. Utilize the existing appropriations currently allocated to a full-time speech language pathologist to fund the full-time FTE reading specialist position. Speech language services would continue under the district's current contracted service model for the 25-26 school year. This reallocation would be formalized through board resolution reclassifying the function of these funds from support services to instruction. Road maintains a balanced budget of additional appropriations. Responds to board priorities by reallocating resources to direct instructional support. Provides a more stable and consistent model for literacy instruction. Cons, continues reliance on contracted speech language services for another year. May limit future flexibility depending on availability of contracted staff and student needs. Then the third option is to approve the budget as originally presented by the district. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion. Okay. But for the 2 members who weren't here for the last meeting.
We understand. So I apologize, but. The second option makes sense to me, except. Why is it still a balanced budget? Technically.
Option 2. Right now, we have been keeping this, so the speech and language pathologist position has not been filled for at least 3 years.
Right.
So we've been budgeting it as an instructional position.
Yeah.
As well as contracted services. So it's in 2 spots right now.
Okay.
With the hopes that somebody throughout the summer would apply and we could hire them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this was stemmed from my proposal during the budget meeting, but I mean, did you guys watch that or do you have questions about this or the backstory of any more? I mean, these 2 heard all the conversation last week. Well, the gist of it is we're not cutting the position. Right, to the reading specialist. Right, if we did one of these options, then. Yeah. That was the guidance that we were. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
I have, yes, my understanding has always been that the board was not involved in the allocation of resources at the building level. That was, the purview of the superintendent. And that the board was simply to approve, resources in terms of FTE, certain number of FTE. And approve a budget that provided for a certain FTE, and then, you know, where that was needed was at the discretion of the superintendent. Now, is that correct, wrong?
That is correct. And that matches the board policy. It's supposed to duties of the superintendent.
So I'm a little uncomfortable with something the board is doing that's directing or tagging. So increased budget to a specific position.
That's fair. I felt like we were, with the retiring that was happening this year, we were using FTE in that area, well, shifting it, I guess. And this proposal would be to keep that one FTE available still to be able to be utilized in whatever the district feels is appropriate, but we can still give our opinion on what we think is appropriate.
An opinion only, I think.
Correct, yeah.
And then is the intent to continue that position into the future as opposed to into one budget year?
I mean, in the end, it's up to Jim how he wants to do that. In my opinion, again, would be at least for a couple of years, but.
Is that if you reduce that FTE, then you are in a situation where you have to have a reduction in force. So, I had heard previous meetings talk of it being a temporary position, transitional position, which would be a temporary hire versus a permanent hire. But again, that's the superintendent's. That's his realm, but the question is, the board wants to continue to support that increased FTE. And can the budget continue to support that increased FTE? And what was the opinion of the board in terms of that FTE?
Okay, I would like to figure out how to support it. Honestly, many years have been needed, but. Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts? Else development.
And for just the sake of, clarity for. If nothing else for the record and for the public discussion, Title II, Title IV. What programs do those? For that $30,000, what's that currently funding?
Part of that is currently funding our student education, so the professional development for administrative staff and the scorecard development we're doing. And part of that is supporting some of the Renaissance purchase. Federal, they're federal. Yeah, those are still some of the funds that are up in here as well. We did get notice as well, we're Title I, we were told originally it would be a 10% reduction, it was 16.5%. So we'll have some additional general fund money that's covering that additional 6.5% of the Title I funds that didn't come in like we were told they would. It's not a huge amount, but
The budget that got approved 2 weeks ago. Had one fewer FTEs than the previous budget. That was the reduction of, among other things, the reduction of the reading specialists. It's the same FTE, they just changed one of the positions to the instruction coach. Right, so thank you. Yeah. That's what I did. So it was the same FTE. This resolution, if we were to go with the option number 2, we can provide a budget that increases those FTEs by 1.
only in that area, and so the funds are budgeted in a service area. The service area funds, the resolution we go to the instruction.
But that FTE position in that area is up to you.
How we utilize the FT as far as programming.
And that feels like that. Actually,
Well, my concern is in earlier meetings, I heard that, basically there wasn't support. Mr. Chris did support continuing with the second, reading specialist. That was highly unusual for any district, let alone a district of our size or school of our size, to have two. And that, whether it was necessary or not, in his view, I can't judge it, I'm not in the classroom, I'm not, that's why he's in charge of allocating those resources, not the board.
I guess I'm taking a lot of feedback from the community where we spoke. I don't know if you were here for that day or not, but we had like two people, 9 people speak who were teachers and parents about wanting to keep the position. And there was a need for it.
And that was the meeting prior to this, for, prior to the last meeting, prior to the budget.
I think so.
Yeah, I was present. I don't.
And to clarify, I had an opportunity with the retirement of a teacher, enrollment that's dropping at the elementary school, and then initiatives that were coming on board regarding literacy, and then also our STAR assessment to be able to do some reprogramming with the help.
Quiet. You want to contribute? I could understand, sorry. On those same lines, Jim, what you were talking about in terms of reprogramming and the discussions we've had at previous meetings. We've talked about the importance of the 90-minute block for instruction and the concern that, see the concern of kids. An increased number of kids not having that as a result of the individual reading instructions. They're being taken out for the small group stuff, and so they're missing out on the 90-minute block before instruction. Is that an accurate summary, or do I have that incorrectly?
No, I think that's part of the discussion that has come up, but I think also just understanding that that was in response to questions that we've
Right.
been fielding. Yeah, so I think holistically looking at it, the change was really about having an opportunity to support the initiatives that we are taking on, such as literacy and the local assessment, and then having somebody embedded to be able to provide support and professional development in doing that.
Not a bad thing to do, but I just wanted to make sure that we're not going to do something that makes it difficult to see whether or not the new stuff that we're doing is having an impact. It's going to. I think that's one of the primary things we wanted with this initiative, was to be able to have a much better idea of whether or not what we're doing is working with our students. And I just want to make sure that if we are now, if we would be moving forward with kind of two different philosophies, that they would muddy the waters or not.
Potentially, but I think that's part of the conversation and the collaboration with the staff as far as it's just my experience. I think it's it's a relatively generalized experience. If you create a program, you create space for services, the intention is usually, the result is usually that you fill those services. So I think in that sense, we have to be real careful, because we do have this MTSS model that we're going through, that we need to build, develop what our decision-making rules are. But the idea is that if we have space, that doesn't necessarily mean that we fill that space if our core instruction is working. And that should be now through our decision-making model. It's not, I'd like to just say it's that clear to the idea of, okay, we're gonna make a decision-making model on the reading fluency, and the cut score is X. And if the student makes it, then they don't receive services. If the student doesn't make it, to receive services. Reading instruction is way more complicated than these determinations. Yeah, which is, we would adjust.
If we kind of get the temperature and the unofficial voting temperature of everyone on the board, where they're leaning towards these three options. Whether you lean towards one or whether you want more information, more time to think about it. Especially if you want more information, maybe we can make sure that Jim comes back. Let's begin now in the next board meeting to fill in the blanks for anybody that has those. Let's see, are you leaning one way or another? Or do you want more time and information?
No, I'm leaning towards option 2.
John?
I'm still asking the question, given another $143,000 to spend, is this what the superintendent thinks would be the #1 priority in the budget? Because I think things may have been focused a little too tightly on reading specialists. And, you know, there might be something else besides funding that second reading specialist that would be of, you know, higher priority. I don't know if it's been looked at from a broader view or not. And then the other thing is, question is, I don't think at Pleasant Hill we've necessarily looked at one-year solutions. We've usually looked further down the road and asked the question, is this sustainable? So those are two things I think.
Three or still want a response from Jim on that question?
I think I'd like a response to that question, but you know, the board is not really limited to those three options either. So the budget committees basically pass a recommendation on this, but then the board can ultimately change the budget and pass a budget that may not be the one the budget committee recommended.
On the first half of that, I think if I'm looking at literacy, which is a big one of our initiatives, I have to consider the secondary level, in particular our middle school. You know, pandemic has been brought up, and that's right now the age of the students are really starting to reach towards that middle school level. And so I think there's an opportunity, if there are funds added, to be able to continue to do work at our middle school. Second part of that was really about sustainability. The sustainability is a difficult one, I think. So if you just consider sustainability, our revenues versus our expenditures, we are overexpending, but we also are very conservative as far as our approach goes. It can continue with declining enrollment. I think that's going to be a continued trend. Uncertainty at the state and federal level right now. And I'm not one to ring a bell and say, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of conservative things generally level out over time. But I think I would say, given the conservative nature of the budgeting of Pleasant Hill School District, I didn't purposely bring an additional FTE to this budget to be able to maintain that conservative approach. It's not a position that's. Well, it's a position, I guess, as any superintendent would say, you know what, the board wants to provide more FTE. Absolutely, I can find a place for more FTE to be spent. Is it necessary right now in this particular budget, given all of the other parameters? I don't believe that it is. We can do a really good job of that. But I've also heard concerns that students in moving to a new program as far as reading and reading specialists, there's concern about students who have been in that model and staff is accustomed to that model and they're supposed to do. I can't deny that. And my experience tells me there's always holes to fill as well.
Your speech and language pathologist, what equivalent FTE is contracted services right now? How much demand is there for that? Are you using a person, half time, full time?
We're using a EA, well, an SLPA for in-person services and Whitney, the better speaker on this.
The SLPA is a 1.0 full-time person.
And then we're using a service.
Yeah.
It's a contracted person. The SLP
Oh,
is a
So we have one in,
full-time online contracted, but it is a person contracted for full-time work.
But they are meetings full time.
Yes. Yeah, like if I were to replace that with an in-person person, it would be replaced with a one.
Is that through Plain SD or?
No, it should be, no, it's through, just an online provider, so parallel.
So to support those services, we had hired a speech and language pathology assistant. And so that is a person that has a certification to work as a speech and language pathology assistant. And so we have, that position is in district to be able to support the online services of the contracted services. And we can continue with that model. It's my belief having somebody in person is a better model.
We have the topics.
And that's the one position that in my, gosh, we did not have that position filled when I started, so this was 3 full years. We have not had a single applicant for that as well. The school psychologist position is a singular one. We've had 1 applicant that we interviewed and made an offer to, and they did not take it. They stayed in the current position. And that's where we will have an interim school psychologists this year in hopes that they will finish their school psychology programs in the 3rd year and apply for it. Once they finish their license, they will work under the license of school psychologists. It's part of that and program was through the USD as a school psychologist.
So a couple of spots. I think that this has been done a phenomenal job in the last 100 years or whatever it's getting now. Maintaining a balanced budget that's conservative while providing services to our student body. It's done a great job. I mean, our beginning fund balance this year will be at like 60%. We're supposed to stay at 20, whatever. There's multiple things in the budget that we're gonna get reimbursed for, so even though they're expenses, they're not true expenses once we get reimbursed, we'll get those funds back. Declining enrollment doesn't necessarily mean declining dollars, because it's a percentage of all students across the whole state. So declining, if we're declining and other districts are increasing, then yes, our money will go down. If everybody's declining, then our money stays the same. If other districts decline more than us, then our funds will actually increase. So I'm not really worried about the funding side of things, especially for one position. I think elementary education, especially in reading, is one of the most important things that we can offer our student body. I think in this transition to the new program, there will be bumpy, as Jim said, it's a new thing. Like transition is always hard. I think at least a couple of years of this position being in there would be great. I know Jim saw an opportunity to make the transition without having to, with the new position that we're gonna have, no matter what, with this coach. And shift some stuff around, which was a good thing, because I'm guessing he didn't think it would improve it initial FTE. But I'm all for it, and I would go for option 2.
Yeah, just to clarify the part about this expenses that are reimbursed, those are gonna be in your special funds.
Right, we can always transition back to.
I'm not quite about,
Like the 700,000 for the seismic, like there's 700,000 we're moving to the gymnasium, but we're gonna get reimbursed for all that.
that's, yeah, and that's done through special fund. What's in the general fund? We don't expect reimbursements other than those that are in special.
Correct.
Okay, good, thank you.
To the point where you'll lean towards any degree or
Yeah, I am leaning towards option 3. My thing with wanting to talk about this and offer this is, along with what you said, I like the conservative approach. But we are making a lot of changes to our literacy stuff right now. And I don't, if we're gonna do it, I want it to be a success. I don't want to get to November and be like, man, this would have been really successful if we had whatever it is. And so I wanted to make sure that Jim knew that the offer was there for that. That if we're going all in on this stuff, let's be all in on this stuff and give it all the support and place that it needs. The budget was brought to us with what it is. This has been heavily discussed and offered, and I feel like I mean, he's saying, yes, of course I can find a place for this person, but do I need them? No. Then I feel like it's then our job to sit back and now hold the process accountable. We've given what was asked for, we offered a little more. We're told no. We're good, we can do it like with this, and I feel like now we be able to process it down.
also leaning towards option 3. I think Jim's, he said, what I was driving at with my questions, Jim, in terms of we picked a path, and I'd like to see at this point if that path is going to work. I don't like necessarily the idea of using our students and our staff as guinea pigs, but at the same time, we made those decisions of good faith. with the hope and the expectation that it is going to work out. I have concerns about, the ambiguity of option 1 or 2 in terms of not necessarily can we afford it. Although that does have, I do have a concern with that. I think assuming it, even in 2 years, that this wouldn't come back to bite us financially, is a little scary to me. But that being said, I feel like almost like it's kicking a can down the road. That we're going to be here again in 1, 2, 3 years where we have a beloved instructor who has worked with and done a lot of great work with students and has had a lot of positive engagement with families, and we're left with essentially to cut that, and then in another situation where it seems like we're criticizing it or blaming staff, when that's one of the reasons why we went this direction, was because we wanted to go in a direction with staff felt more empowered. And the tools that they need to do their work. And that's why I don't want to be here again. But if I can avoid it. And for however long we've been waiting for an SLP, it really sucked to have one apply. And I think that you look at the need there, which ties right into literacy and affects the entire district, that would be a real unfortunate thing to miss out on. With that being said, like I said, we're not voting tonight. There's still 2 weeks in public comment next board meeting, that I'm sure that I am leaving myself open to, and I'm sure everybody else would agree to. I also, agree with John in terms of making sure that the board doesn't overstep. That's also a path that I can get started down on and create an expectation. Either from the staff side of things or the community side of things, that's something that this board will do.
Sir. There are a couple of times that we sitting here in the same situation 1 or 2 years from now. Meaning, we decide we didn't actually need a second specialist, so we're going to get rid of somebody. Is that the concern?
Well, my understanding is that what the board is asking of the district is to have this position temporarily. And that's kind of one of the justifications for the addition to the budget and to the switch concerns that something that we can't afford in future years, is that, well, it's only expected to be 1 or 2 years. That's somebody that we're hiring, we're bringing in to fill that position, and may get to a point where even if it's understood that it's a temporary position where we have frustration and disappointment, and which is understandable, and it's just been it's not been a pleasant experience, and definitely learning and experience for what to discuss in board meetings will not. Difficult because you want to have an open discussion and share your concerns and talk about the priorities of student success, but it's really hard in a small district to do that without it. Sometimes to me, as it reflects on the performance of our staff.
But that possibility feels like a completely different situation than the one we're in. You know, if somebody gets hired temporary basis and doesn't remember that, or decides they don't like that or whatever, that's on them. That's not on us. So that part doesn't personally give me any angst at all. What gives me angst is some measure of uncertainty going into something brand new. And everybody's talked a little bit about it, that transition period where we're not 100% sure how that's gonna go. Ultimately, I think it was great. For all of this work. For a little while, those bumps might be significant. And if for $143,000 twice, we can minimize those bumps for the sake of kids learning how to read better. And if there's anything wrong out there in the world that I live in, it's kids, adults don't know how to read. They don't. It's horrible. So I see that, and I'm like, okay, this makes a ton of sense to me to go down this road, and if for a 2-year period, we can hedge our bet a little bit. So that those kids have a better chance of being great readers when they grow up. I'm all in. And the risks seem minimal to me. So I hear it, and I'm not poo-pooing anybody's perspective. But I'm just wait a minute, this is a little different scenario if we're sitting here 2 years from now and we do this. It's not the same thing as what we're sitting here today. Feeling fine for us.
Just to clarify, I understand that what you're saying in terms of the person that we may hire, I'm more talking about the rest of the staff and parents. It's the impact it has there, because I think, like Jim said earlier, is that the staff is used to having these resources. And so you're getting you're potentially once again, faced with upsetting, and I understand you're going to have that often when you're making decisions that there's going to be people that I'd rather. Like if we're gonna do it, just move forward and do it now, but I also am very, supportive of the point you're making in terms of there's no such thing as too much resources to put into literacy.
We're gonna have another budget next year where these things have been in place for a year, and I think some things are gonna come to light. I don't know if they're gonna be, but some things are gonna come to light, and we'll be sitting here, you know, being asked to approve a completely different position that we now realize we need, like we need behavior support, we need literacy support, we need like whatever it is. You know, I think it's gonna make itself known in the next school year. If anything.
Mary, how much is spent on the contracted services with speech person?
I think, well, I know for next year, we just talked about 145.
So it's pretty much a push with an FTE in-house.
And this 143 is based on
That's pretty much what we're at.
It's about the expected.
With the contract. But I mean, I guess like next year. would we represent that one FTE?
That's what I was gonna ask next.
Because I think we're still hoping that position fills.
Okay, I would. Yes, caution the board from going too deep into projecting next year. Also too deep into going into, if you were to add this, what it would look like as far as a temporary position versus non-temporary position. I could open the position with this zero qualified candidates as far as having grading specialists. We're not, I'm failing anyway. But those are my problems, I guess.
Just in discussing the options, but the one thing that I see in option two is it closes the door on if someone comes along who's would fill your speech and language position. You no longer have a slot there. I understand you budgeted the slot, but not filled it in the last 3-4 years. But if you do option two, then it closes the door on that. I mean, it remains neutral budget wise, but then it does limit what you can do.
It does, and I'm projecting in the future, a little bit going against what I just told you. I would anticipate that we would be in a similar situation next year, having a little bit of a pulse on what is coming out of the schools, like our school psychologist, as an example. The last time we talked, there was 13 going through the EVO program, something like that. So I mean, that's feeding. Essentially, we're talking about the entire Lane County. Hopefully, and that's folks, if they stay in the program or they go outside of state to work, and our speech and language pathologists are, there's even less what to do as far as coming to school.
But option one would maintain that flexibility for you to hire someone else.
Yeah.
So before I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to ask Jim to come back with any additional information, presentations, anything like that at the next meeting when we do when we do vote on the budget.
There's no more than if you would take through the straw poll, so more people are determine what you're going to. So the next slide. The next one.
So then let's
What? Strong.
I'll make a very good point. Either if you put option 1 and 2. But one of the other, not three.
In option one and option three.
I'm also still towards option 3. Anybody thinks of something after we leave tonight or coming days, make sure you reach out to Jim to ask questions. Ask that he bring something back for additional discussion on the next board meeting. Nothing you guys necessarily needed, I just wanted to put that out there. Anything else before we move on, Jim?
That was good. Thank you.
All right, 7.0, other business. There is none, we are going to recess our regular meeting into executive session. It's under ORS 192.6602D. Conduct deliberations with persons designated to carry out labor negotiations. We will reconvene a regular board meeting after the executive session, but there is nothing else on the agenda at this point to be discussed. So